Hi everybody, welcome. Welcome to our monthly get-together sharing good wine and good fellowship. Today we're doing our wine tasting here in the wine bar. And we have all sorts of folks in the wine bar having a great time. And I thought it was the perfect place to share our tasting with you. So let's get started. We have 4 wines today that we're going to be tasting. We're going to be doing our Merrill's Vineyard Riesling 2008. It's a fabulous vintage. It's one that is getting on a lot of wine lists in the state of Texas because it's Alsatian, and I'll explain that when we're doing the tasting. It's got a nice finish. The next wine that we have is our Tex Zin, and this is the 2006, but we also have a 2007 version as well. And our third wine is going to be our Cabernet Franc, which is the single vineyard. It's a brand new label. You can see the cactus flowers. And this vineyard is coming out of the Denison area. It's called Cedar Crest Vineyards. And we grow Cabernet Franc and Shiraz in that vineyard. And it's right along the Red River. So it's called Texoma. That's the new appellation up there. And we'll talk about appellation today when we talk about single vineyard. And then we're going to do one of my favorite wines tasting right now is the Paolo Merlot. It's 2004. This wine is just coming into its own. It's got a beautiful complexity, and I'm very pleased and proud of it right now. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to show a couple of different openers. This is the opener that I always recommend. It's called a screw pull. And the reason why I recommend it is that it is virtually impossible to mess up. One of the things that I run into frequently is people will tell me that they are opening up a bottle of wine, and I'll show you what's so special about this. This guide allows the auger to go into the cork straight. And so the beauty of this is that it pulls the cork straight up. Most people who have problems with corks, what they do is as they lift the cork, like when we get to this point, when the cork is out halfway, with this type of an opener, what they do is the auger's in straight to begin with, but when they get to this point, they bend it. And when they bend it, they bust the cork in the middle. And naturally, they blame the winery, but it's the way in which they're doing it. The purpose, first of all, the cork is inserted by a metal rod, and the metal rod goes on the top of the cork, and it pushes the cork straight into the bottle. It does not push it in at an angle. So as a result, the cork stays whole because there's no torque on the cork. Hey, that rhymes, son of a gun. Torque on the cork, so don't torque my cork. So you want to just lift straight out. So here we go, we lift it out. And now it's easy to take the cork off because you can just spin it in the opposite direction. And now what you have is a whole cork again. Now, we have wax on the top of ours. You noticed I didn't take the wax off. There's no reason to take the wax off. And normally when you lift it off, the wax just comes straight off. And now you have both ends of the cork. Typically, the end that was in the top, if you're going to reinsert it into the bottle, you would typically turn it over and you would push that end in because it's tighter. It is a more tightly packed cork, so it does a better job of closing. Now, I do not recommend using or reinserting a cork. The reason is that when you take wine out of a bottle, like we're going to do in just a second here, these are nice 19.5-ounce glasses, and we sell them here at the winery. I recommend that at home you never use a glass less than about 20 ounces. And the reason is that the bigger the bowl and the bigger the capacity of the glass, the more aroma that is captured, okay? So we're going to pour wine in. We went right down the middle that time, and now what has happened is we've created an air void. So this bottle now has about 30% of it is air. So if I just stick the cork in the top of it like that, it is oxidizing right now. Now, if I drink this tonight, tomorrow, probably not a bit of difference, especially if you should put the wine into the refrigerator with the cork in it. If this was a 20-year-old bottle of wine and you did this, you'd probably lose about 50 to 70% of the character of that wine. So you would literally destroy that experience, because those bottles of wine are so delicate at that age. You know, it's kind of like, you know, if you're drinking an old bottle of wine, it's kind of like taking your grandmother bowling. You know, you really can't expect them, you know, not to be somewhat fragile, and you have to take special care and precaution. So with a younger wine, like a 2008, even a 2006 red, it's a little bit more durable. But when a wine gets older, you have to be much more delicate with that wine. So I remove my cork, I collect my corks, I donate my corks that are, you know, are already used, or sometimes some of our customers want to buy those corks, and then they make trivets and they make cork boards and all sorts of things. I really think that we need to recycle these, because it's a shame not to reuse them. They make wonderful keychains, they make nice cork boards, they make trivets, all sorts of things, and all you need is a glue gun and a cork, and you can make all sorts of crafty things just by putting them on a firm board. So now that we've opened the wine, if you take this, it's called the vacuum van system. It's just a single valve on the top of the plastic cork. You just insert it into the top of the bottle. You take your vacuum pump, and all you do is insert it in the top, and 3, 4, 5, 6, about 6.5 pumps, and I've taken all the air out. That's a vacuum sealed container. As long as my valve is good on the top of that bottle, I always put it back in the refrigerator, reds or whites, because by putting it in the refrigerator, it slows all the oxidative components down. So by sucking a vacuum, putting it in the refrigerator, and if I forgot that this was in the refrigerator, it would be good for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and when I took it out, as long as I still had a vacuum, that wine would just about be as fresh as it is right now. It's a technique that we use at the winery. When I partially empty a tank, we actually inject gas into the top of the tank, nitrogen, argon, carbon dioxide, to fill that void. And essentially, this is what we're doing, is we're eliminating the air. Naturally, wine tanks can't suck a vacuum, because in doing so, you could theoretically implode the tank, and oh boy, that would be a hard one to explain to the insurance company, how you just sucked your tank. So we use it on a bottle because the bottle is good and sturdy, and it can handle it. So that's the system that we use here. They're very inexpensive. Normally they come with 2 of these vacuum van stoppers, but you can buy spares of these if you happen to keep a couple of extra wine open at house. You know, I recommend maybe keeping about 6 of these, maybe 8, and then this way you could have 6 to 8 bottles of wine going all the time at the house, and there's nothing more fun than to sit down at a meal and to be able to enjoy 3 different bottles of wine without feeling the need to open up all these new wines. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll purposely leave a little bit of wine and just see how it goes with the next meal that we have. the next day. So that's the system that we use here. So now let's remember, we want to perk up your nose. Remember our little system of perking up your nose? You take your index finger and scratch your nose like this and kind of get the nerve endings kind of stimulated. You know, it's kind of like, you know, you slap yourself in the face and you kind of wake up a little bit. Well, it's doing the same thing. You're waking up your nose. Then what you want to do is you want to turn your head to the right and smell, and I can already tell my left nostril is just really on. And now I'm going to turn my head to the right, and my right nostril is doing absolutely nothing. I'm getting 100% of the aroma out of my left nostril. It's always a good idea to learn how to swirl the glass on the table, much safer than swirling it away from the table, because when you're on the table, you know, you can control it a little bit better. So now we look at the beautiful color of Riesling. This is Riesling. It's from Merrill's Vineyard. Merrill's Vineyard is located in Halfway, Texas. And now you'll ask, where is Halfway, Texas? Well, many of you have been to Lubbock. Right? Now, I can't see you, but I want you to raise your hand, all those folks that have been to Lubbock, Texas. Okay. So you've been to Lubbock. It's the high plains of Texas between 3,200 feet of elevation and 3,700 feet of elevation, the highest grape-growing region in the United States. It's a very high elevated plain. It's a high desert. Very little rainfall, 13 to 15 inches of rainfall. So most of the water is either in the spring with spring rains, a little bit in the summer, and sometimes we have to supplement with the Ocalawa aquifer that comes all the way from the springs and rivers of Colorado down through the high plains. Really pristine water, and it irrigates the fields there. The vineyard is not only 40 miles north of Lubbock, that takes you to Plainview, Texas, and it's the home of the Bell Brothers and all of our fine growers that are up in the Hale, H-A-L-E County area. Plainview is half the distance from Lubbock to Amarillo. And then if you make a left turn, you go 10 miles, and you go to a town on the gin side. It says Quarterway Gin. Well, the first time I saw that, I thought, Quarterway Gin to what? And so I went 10 more miles, and you come to Halfway, Texas, which is where the vineyard is. It's also where Rodney Bell, one of our growers, lives. His family has been in Halfway, Texas for many, many years. And between Rodney and Freddie, they manage our vineyards up there, and they also have vineyards of other growers, and they also have their own vineyards. And then when you go 10 more miles, because by this time, all those that are interested in fractions can't wait to go another 10 miles, so you actually find three-quarter-way Texas. So, you know, if you do it, you know, you become excited as can be about, okay, now I've got to go 10 more miles. So you go 10 more miles and you come to nothing. There's absolutely nothing 10 miles west of three-quarter-way Texas, and we kind of say that the folks up in the high plains have a hard time going all the way. So that's the little way we remember Halfway, Texas. Actually, if you go about 30 miles from three-quarter-way Texas, you actually come to New Mexico. So we're pretty close to the Texas-New Mexico border. And that whole region on the Caprock, that whole elevated plain region is called the High Plains. And it's a separate appellation. Appellation means a distinctive growing region. And the High Plains is considered a distinctive growing region. Within that appellation, we have Hale County, which is a smaller grouping of the appellation, and then ultimately, the tightest of all appellations is a vineyard-designated wine. Now, the special element of that is that When we drink this wine, we are tasting the terroir. We are tasting the entire experience of the grapevine in that location, interacting with the environment of the high plains, and it gives that wine a distinctive flavor. If we took a Riesling grape and planted it 40 miles south in Lubbock, it would taste very different than this. So this wine is totally unique in the fact that it always has this kind of minerally characteristic, and I think it comes from the water in the area, because it's got a lot of minerals in the water. Remember, the water comes all the way down from the mountains in Colorado, and it also has a reflection of the soil. Now, we refer to the soil as good dirt, and we say that very affectionately because a vineyard with good dirt means that it will sustain the plant in a healthy environment, allowing proper irrigation. This vineyard was one of the first vineyards in the state of Texas to go with underground drip irrigation. So, as we evolved in irrigation over the last 30 years in Texas, the first thing that happened was we were irrigating the way the cotton growers irrigated 30 years ago, and that was furrow irrigation. What that meant is that they would take pipes and flood the cotton field. Well, we're all becoming very, very water conscious. We want to save water. So the next step was overground drip irrigation, and this is a small black pipe that drips 1 gallon of water per hour per vine, and it irrigates the land. Well, then we discovered that you have a lot of evaporation during the day. So the next step was to take that pipe and put it underground, preferably irrigate at night so that you don't even get any solar reflection of evaporation, and you wind up with minimizing water usage. And that's part of our whole Messina Hof philosophy, is being earth-friendly. The farmer is probably the most earth-friendly occupation on this planet, because we live and make our living by the land. So we have to be good stewards of that land. And underground drip irrigation is the most efficient method of irrigating. So now we swirl the wine and we put our nose in the glass, we smell, and we pick up that distinctive smell of Riesling. Riesling smells like a granny apple. If you take a brand new granny apple and you take a knife and you cut into that granny apple and turn it over and smell it, that's what this smells like. It smells like that granny apple. The next thing is that when you smell, you pick up kind of that almost a flinty characteristic, almost like you're smelling a piece of rock, because the underland, the grade of this property, first is this great sandy loam. Underneath that is caliche, and caliche is clay, and then underneath that is rock. So you start picking up some of that characteristic, and now when you taste it, wow! Now, what I'm picking up is just kind of that hint of a sweet apple. It's not overly sweet. It's not like a candied apple. It's just barely sweet. Of a granny apple. And this style is called Alsatian. Now, why do you call it Alsatian? Well, they grow Riesling, Gewürztraminer, and Muscat Canelli in an area of France that is on the border with Germany, and it's called Alsace. And in that region, for whatever tradition, they have traditionally made wines that are slightly drier than the Germans. The Germans tend to make their Riesling, maybe 1.5% sweet. This is about 0.5% sweet. So it's just got just a little hint of sweet. So if somebody said, I want a bone dry, absolutely no sweetness at all, probably the Pinot Grigio, probably the Chardonnay. But just a hint of sweet, and this is the perfect wine. It is, the thing I love about it is that it works nicely with lemon sauces. It works nicely with cream sauces like fettuccine Alfredo. It also works absolutely beautifully with spicy sauces that have maybe a little bit of bacon like carbonara or a little bit of pepper, because they create a little bit of heat. It works. Now, if you're one of those Southwest cuisine lovers that just loves their food just burning hot, my recommendation is that you go with the Father and Son cuvee, which is about 1.5 times sweeter than this is. Or, in some cases, if you're one of those Bunsen burner kind of people that just, you know, like to the average person, you drink or you eat their food and, you know, you have instant indigestion and want to go to the emergency room. I mean, that kind of heat, I recommend you go to the Angel, because it's amazing. Sweetness in a wine is like a fire extinguisher on spice. So with something excessively hot, the sweetness in the wine itself just makes a lot of that neutralize. So Salute, just a lovely wine. The 2008 Merrill's Vineyard Riesling, just a wonderful compliment to a meal. So enjoy. Golly, that's good. I've got to really give the winemaker a raise on that one. I mean, that's a beauty. The next wine we're going to have is the Zin, and we have trademarked the name Tex Zin. Well, why? Because Zinfandel is a very fanciful and joyful wine in America, and every producer of Zinfandel likes to come up with something fun and exciting about the name, and we thought this is perfect. I mean, Texas, Tex Zin makes great sense. So this is with the vacuum stopper. You notice, I don't know if you could hear that, but I'll do it again. We'll suck a vacuum. See, this is about 80% full, so it only took 2 or 3 pumps. And now listen to it. Okay, just a little bit of air released, and now we pour the wine. This time we're going to pour the wine with the glass sideways.